Anthony Tony Orville Carey, the ninth of 11 children born to Louise Jarvie Carey and Frank Carey, was born on May 29, 1920. His godparents were his brother and his sister, Norbert and Myrtle Carey. Tony left to enter the U.S. Army and would be stationed at Fort Sheridan, Illinois. His 5 sisters, Myrtle, Alice, Helen, Kathleen, and Loretta, took him to the train station in Oconto. They were all crying as they said goodbye. He told them to stop crying, that he would be back. Tech 4 Anthony O. Carey, infantryman, was assigned to the 3rd Armored Division, 32nd Armor Regiment. The 3rd Armored Division was nicknamed the Spearhead Division and was sometimes referred to within the U.S. Army as the 3rd Herd. It was an armored division of the U.S. Army. The division was first activated in 1941 and was a key participant in the European theater of World War II. They were stationed in Germany for much of the Cold War. From information received from Tony's niece, Mona Matravers Martineau, Tony did come home on leave. Mona's family lived in Sturgeon Bay, where her dad, Beau Matravers, and Jim Carey worked for the shipyards. Tony stayed with Mona's family. They would play checkers and other games together, and he told Mona that would be the day when she could beat him at checkers. Tony dressed mostly in his Army uniform while he was home on leave. One time, while home on leave in Stiles, they all walked over to the chicken shack together, even Grandpa. From a copy of the letter that we have that Tony wrote to his brother Pat, 3rd child Pat was tragically killed in a farm accident in 1948. Tony was stationed at Indiantown Gap Military Reservation, Pennsylvania. For more than 50 years, the Pennsylvania National Guard had trained in the quaint little town. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor and the U.S. entrance into the war, the post became a staging area for what was called the hard-nosed business of training for combat. 250,000 soldiers would pass through Indiantown Gap Military Reservation on the way to the European battlefront. And in Tony's letter to his brother Pat, he writes,
Dear Pat, well, how is everything going? Suppose you're enjoying married life now. Hey, what? Are you still working for Norb and living there or not? Suppose you're busy farming now, you and Norb. I hear you have another tractor, should be able to turn the ground up now. Guess Beau has the milk route now. Must seem lonesome, no truck around after so many years, but things are changing every day. Well, I'm still in the Gap, not much news. Still driving tank, and we go out 2 and 3 days at a time on maneuvers. Pretty cold yet sleeping outside, and wet. We're getting a lot of rain, but I guess I'll live through it. I thought I would see a little action, but guess not by the way they're going. We're supposed to be working 7 days a week, but only worked a half a day today. I got an expert score on the submachine gun today, not so bad. Supposed to get medals later on. The only gun I can't hit with is a pistol. I have to shoot it tomorrow to try and qualify, but I don't know. Well, there really isn't any news here, but thought would write anyway. Guess I will see a show tonight, about all there is to do. Can't get any beer here on Sundays. This state has the blue law. So until later, Pat, be good to yourself. Give my regards to the wife and baby, and also Grace and Norb. When you get time, drop a line. Brother Tony.
7 divisions, the 3rd, which Tony belonged to, and 5th Armored, and 5 infantry divisions, all trained and staged at Indiantown Gap before shipping overseas. The 3rd Armored Division entered combat on June 29, 1944, taking part in the hedgerow fighting. The terrain in the area selected for the initial penetration of French soil was generally level or gently sloping. However, it was broken up in a crazy quilt pattern of small fields separated by hedgerows. Hedgerows consisted of an earthen mound or wall, 6 to 10 feet in width and 4 to 8 feet in height, covered with a scrub undergrowth. Along the top of the wall grew rows of trees. Forming an important part of the obstacle thus created was the ditch which ran along one or both sides of the mound. The roads, narrow and winding, ran between these hedgerows and offered the defenders many advantageous positions for ambushes or surprise attacks on the advancing foot troops and armor. Observation was normally limited from one hedgerow to the next, although an occasional structure, such as a church tower or a village, would widen the horizon. In August 1944, the division participated in the heavy fighting involved in closing the Falaise Pocket or Gap, pocketing the German 7th Army. By the beginning of August 1944, the German forces were being encircled, and German High Command wanted these reserves to help an orderly retreat to the Seine. However, the German High Command was overruled by Adolf Hitler, who demanded an attack at Mortain at the western end of the Falaise Pocket. The attack was repelled by the Allies, who again had advance warning from Ultra. Throughout the war, the intelligence services of the Western powers, particularly the British, intercepted, broke, and read significant portions of the German military's top secret message traffic. That cryptographic intelligence, disseminated to Allied commanders under the code name Ultra, played a significant role in the effort to defeat the Germans and to achieve Allied victory. General George S. Patton moved his troops, forming a pocket trapping 50,000 German troops. Patton's thrust prevented the Germans from establishing the Seine as a defensive line. 6 days later, on August 25, 1944, the Spearhead Division had cut across the Seine River. The Battle of the Falaise Pocket was the decisive engagement of the Battle of Normandy. The campaign in Normandy is considered by historians to end either July 24, 1944, the start of Operation Cobra on the American front, August 25, 1944, the liberation of Paris, or August 30, 1944, the date the last German unit retreated across the River Seine. Anthony Orville Carey was killed in action on August 29, 1944. 2,541 members of the 3rd Armored Division gave their lives in World War II. The 3rd Armored Division breached the Siegfried Line with the capture of Rotgen on September 12, 1944, and continued a slow advance against heavy resistance to the vicinity of Langwehr. Tony is buried in the Stiles Catholic Cemetery, Stiles, Wisconsin, with his mother, father, brother Pat, and sister Myrtle. On November 8, 1944, Tony was posthumously awarded the Purple Heart for military merit and for wounds received in action resulting in his death. Tony had been engaged to Margaret Dahl, and after Tony's death, she never married. Mona remembers that when word came that Tony had been killed in the war, her family went to Stiles to be with Grandma and Grandpa Carey. She remembers Grandma kneeling in her bedroom by her dresser, praying the rosary, and how very sad that Grandma was. Grandma said that her family circle had been broken.
Don Glenn recently recalled his vivid memories of Tony Carey. Don was a few years younger than Tony and remembered Tony as someone who was liked by everyone. He said when dealing with others, Tony had the patience of Job and would do anything to help, including letting the young guys ride with him in his brother Norb's milk truck. When he was young, Don was given an old bicycle that was originally given to his uncle by his grandfather. The bicycle was a special gift, but by the time Don received it to work, it needed repairs. When Tony Carey heard the problem, On a milk route trip to Green Bay, Tony went out of his way to a special store there to find parts for Don's bike. Don has never forgotten that kindness.
Then sad to say, I remember very well the day that the United States Army came to the Carey farm. And evidently no one was at the Carey farm at the time, and they came to our farm, the Jacart farm, which was right next to the Carey farm. And Norbert Carey was helping my dad dig potatoes out of the field. We had a field in front of the house towards County Trunk J and towards the road, and they were digging potatoes. And they came to tell Norbert that Tony Carey, Anthony Carey, had been killed in action.
When news came of Tony's death in World War II, Don said Helen Jansen organized a program at a 4-H meeting to honor Tony and his service. Don emotionally recalled having a role in the program and being told by his dad, Lloyd, that this was a serious matter and that he must do his very respectful best. There's little doubt that Don and Lloyd and Pearl and the whole Couillardville community were touched by the life of Tony Carey.